So if you've just cut a tree down and it's only been a couple months, it's probably not gonna have mushrooms growing out of it yet. It's kind of like if you put a seed in the ground, it takes a few years to get fruit out of it, right? And the mushroom is just the fruit. The mushroom is not the whole fungus. So the actual fungus is basically just a bunch of little, what we call mycelium, almost like roots, but they're not roots, they're the whole organism. And they're either inside the wood or inside the ground. So that's why when you pick mushrooms, you're not killing fungus, because it's just a fruit. It's like picking an apple. You're not going to kill an apple tree by picking an apple. What we might find today, we might find hen of the woods or chicken of the woods. It's possible. I kind of doubt that. It's been a little bit dry, so I think we'll find probably smaller things. Maybe growing off wood, we'll probably find some brick caps or Hypholoma lateritium. Those are edible. I would be not surprised to find those. Lots of little crest fungi will definitely be growing right now. There's something called Phlebia that I'm sure we'll see because I've been seeing it all over the place. They make their living by forming this relationship with these trees by wrapping their mycelium around the roots of the tree and exchanging water and nutrients in exchange for sugars that the tree produces. Because basically the surface area of the mycelium of the fungus is much finer than the roots of the tree. And so any tree that's particularly large is not capable of getting that size unless it forms these relationships with these fungus. So really any old tree, you can assume definitely that it has multiple fungal partners growing on its roots. So that's one of the things that we're looking for. So for instance, if there was no dead wood and only some really, really young saplings, it's a terrible place to look for mushrooms is what I'm saying.
Did anybody lose this bag?
They created a relationship with fungi where the fungi wrap their little tendrils in the ground around the roots. And the tree, after it photosynthesizes to produce its sugars, it will give some of them to the fungus, and the fungus will in turn help it get water and nutrients because it wants its tree to survive so that it can survive. Right. Crest fungus right now that I've been finding everywhere. It's kind of gelatinous when it's young, but this one is sort of older and harder. It's called Phlebia radiata. And it kind of just grows in these weird little circles, and it basically is just this crust that grows on this wood, and it's orange. And it doesn't have like gills or pores or anything. It just has kind of like a mess of what kind of thinks it's gills. And the spores are just maturing right here on the surface, and over time when wind and stuff like that comes or rain, then they just blow away in the wind, and that's how they're dispersed. So mushrooms are really just methods of spore dispersal. That is what they're for. They're just a house to disperse spores. So these ones are just dispersing it just right there. They're pretty boring, honestly. Oh yeah, let's get out of the...
What are they called?
Sapharella. Starts with a P. And they're very dainty and they're very brittle. They're called like brittle stems or something. We should probably all get to one side. So this is what the bottom side looks like, and you can see that it's a little bit,
It looks like that one.
it's very similar. But the other one will never produce these shelves on top. So this is called Phlebia tremulosa. The other one is Phlebia radiata. So a lot of people prefer common names, but the thing about mushrooms is that most mushrooms don't have common names because people don't care about them unless they're edible or anything like that. So all the edible ones have common names, and you can use the common names because they're often fine. So this is what they feel like when they're really fresh, and you should feel it. Just gross. I mean, this one's kind of extra gross. They're usually not quite
So
this
then
gross.
extra fresh.
Yeah, I guess.
Wow.
So they're usually like kind of gelatinous-y, kind of like ears, you know. So they get dried out and start to look like that. But these are really common edibles actually in Chinese hot and sour soup. So if you go to a Chinese market, you can buy these mushrooms, and they're dried in a bag. So these are not good specimens. We'll see more of them. They're actually really common. It's all of this stuff. All of this is the same thing. Yeah, this is like an older version that has this fuzz growing on the top now. But this is all that, and this is all down here too.
How about that big
Yeah, we're gonna get there next. So this is all that growing down here. The scientific name in Europe for it is Auricularia auriculajudae, which Some people translate it as Jew's ears, which was supposed to be translated as Judas's ears.
Oh, okay.
But either way, I don't think that there's any good reason to use an ethnic group to describe a non-human species. So that's sort of a thing that the plant community is like, let's call it wood ears. It's just a big, hard, white mushroom. This is actually not the color of the mushroom. This is actually algae that grows on it over time. Just because it's a big, hard, clean surface that pops up out of nowhere and has tiny little hairs on it. So when algae manages to find its way there, it loves it and it lives there. So often when this is old, it looks green on top because it has algae, but it's actually just white. So this other thing is Trametes gibosa. I'll grab one just to show you what it looks like on the bottom. So there's another thing called Trametes lactinia that looks somewhat similar. It's like a white shelfy guy like this, and it's pretty hard, and they're both in Trametes. But the way that you can definitely always tell the difference is by looking at the bottom. So this one, Trametes lactinia, the other one, would just have dots on the bottom. So it would just like there's a bunch of little white surface with a bunch of dots on it. And they're pores, you know, like pores on your face. So they're technically tubes. So all of these are basically pores and gills. They're all just surfaces where the spores are maturing and falling down. So if it were dots, they would be tubes, circular tubes, where the spores are maturing inside the tube and then falling out using gravity. So in here, this is like halfway basically between being pores and gills. This is literally just it turning into having gills, but over millions of years. And they found that a lot of them do that. A lot of them started out having pores and then they evolved to having gills because they seem to like it better surface area wise or something like that. So that's what this is doing. It's just halfway between that. So often when something, you know, like your ID book will ask you if something has pores or gills, it might be somewhere in between. They did find out via a lot of scientific research that there is some very slight ejection happening. But I think they have to do a lot more studying about that. I don't think they know a lot about it, but mostly it is gravity. Like they won't ever grow with their gills going up this way. Or they will try to, and then they'll just... You can touch any mushroom that you want, and you don't even have to wash your hands, but you should anyways, because COVID.
Deadly gal. Is that what it's called, deadly, or you're calling it
No,
deadly?
that's its like common name is the deadly gallerina.
It's a good common name. If we're going to use a common name, just it'll kill you, and then it's genus. Yep. Let's see. So the way that we tell what these are first off the color. They're this sort of orangey brown color, right? They have gills. They don't have pores. They always have gills. And they have this tiny little ring right here. Wow. And that is what is left over of a veil that used to be covering the gills. And it covers them until they're mature, just as sort of some extra protection. So that will always be left over. And the ring itself is not any particular color, but the reason it's a color right now is because the spores have dropped on it and stuck to it. So a lot of the times, basically spore color is very important to the identification of your mushroom. It can be basically any color except maybe like, I think blue is like the only really not. So oftentimes when people ask you what the spore color is, what you could do is take the mushroom home and put it on a piece of paper or aluminum foil, and you could take a spore print, which is basically just waiting until the spores fall, and then you can see what color they are once they're all piled up, because you can't see each one individually. But often you don't need to do a spore print because there will be something right here on the mushroom that'll show you what the mushroom looks like, what its spore color looks like.
Did people have to die for people to know that it's deadly, or?
I guess so, probably. Yeah.
But do a lot of the deadly ones bear resemblance to ones that are not dead, or vice versa?
That is entirely dependent on your ability to understand nuance. So I think they don't look anything the same, but I've seen some people really look at something and go, that's this thing, and I'm like, wow, how would you get that? So, you know, it really depends. I don't think they look very similar to a lot of I mean, especially because, like, how often do you find something that's this little and dainty and think like, yeah, I'm gonna eat that for dinner? Shape's the same as turkey tail, but it does not have as many colors. It's often just green or gray, and the green is just like over here where the green is usually algae more so than anything else, but I do think it does have some of its own green on it.
And its name again?
Serena unicolor with a C, C-E-R-R. And then the underside is kind of gray, and it actually has this sort of mazy toothed look. So sometimes instead of gills or pores, mushrooms will have what we call teeth. which are basically like stalactites or whatever. Yeah, sure, that one. And the spores are basically just maturing on the surface of those prongs and then falling. It is called Scutellaria. It's more on this side if you can find a way to get closer. These little orange dots are fungus, yes. I wish I could pull one off, but I'm not going to because I promised. The edges of it, they're little black hairs. And the common name of this is eyelash cup because it's a little orange cup that basically just has black hairs around the outside edge of it. I don't know why it has those black hairs there, but they're very cool if you look at it with a microscope. But they're actually really common. They're these just weird little guys that they can be maybe twice as big as this. So sometimes they get a bit bigger and you can really see the lashes better. But they're a really interesting small little thing to find. This is designed for probably jewelry. I don't know. If you want to buy them on eBay, you just put jeweler's loop.
Oh, okay.
So false turkey tail is the common name. So basically, we haven't found the turkey tail yet, but we will. This looks really similar to turkey tail on the top, but on the bottom it does not have any pores. It's just a flat parchment. There's no dots or anything. There's no tubes going on. It's just making its spores right on this flat paper. These are obviously not so edible, but it's fun to watch the spores fly out. So as you can see, these make their spores inside of them and then wait for wind or rain to basically just jostle them, and then the spores go all over the place.
So
When they're young, if you cut them open and they're all white inside still, then you can eat them, yeah.
but are they very airy? They look like they're airy though. No.
No, they'll be like tofu consistency when they're young. Yeah. So it's like a white tofu type thing inside. And then as they get older, it turns to like dust. Which is why you cut them open and make sure that they're not all like browny yellow and turning into dust.
What are these guys down here?
That's Echinoderma resinosa.
What's there about it?
They're edible. That one's a little older. If I was eating that, I would probably just cut the edges off.
Oh, really? Huh.
Petronellus micaceus or mica caps. They're in the ink cap group. So there's a lot of different species that people will call inky caps, and it's because they do something called deliquesce, which means turn to liquid, basically. And the reason they do this is to basically recycle the energy that they made using this mushroom. So they will try to basically grow really quickly, release their spores as quickly as they can, and as they're releasing those spores, as soon as they're released, the area that doesn't have spores anymore starts to turn to liquid. So from the edges up, it will slowly start to basically turn inky and black. There's not any in here yet that are doing that, but you can kind of see up here that they're getting a little started on that. So you can see they're kind of turning into black goopy stuff. These are pretty dry, but they will eventually. If you put them, for instance, like in a jar.
You need to get past?
White.
No.
Well, you're not wearing that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
They can be all different colors, but they're dainty and they come out of voiding clusters and they have little white plates. That's a common.
Do they ever some plants will just stay for a while and they might not grow anymore, but then when the conditions are right, they'll start growing again. Would that happen?
Yeah,
with them?
no, not with mushrooms usually. Usually if they stop growing, they're just gonna rot away now.
Okay.
And then they will grow out of the same spot again.
Right. Okay. Right.
But
you're saying
usually the mushrooms don't, keep growing bigger, especially like fine ones like this. Some of the bigger ones might do that, but even then, really, they're just growing slowly in that case. Mushrooms often do what we call abort, which is basically they start growing their fruit and then something messes up, or sometimes it's just that messes up. Sometimes the gravity will get messed up, like if a log is turned or something, that'll make them abort, or too much sunshine will make them abort. So for instance, like I'll see some oyster mushrooms starting and then I'll come back 2 days later thinking that they're going to be big and open now, and they're just dried out and they're little, you know? So that's a really common thing for mushrooms to do.
These are Mycena?
These are Mycena, yeah. And Mycena are never edible and kind of hard to ID as species when they look sort of just brown like that. There are a few I don't know what that is. Here's a mushroom. Okay. I don't know what it is. I'm not gonna pick it because there's only one. I don't know what it is.
Doesn't help that they're so pretty too.
I think I would actually like them. If it weren't for the pee. I think I would actually learn to accept it.
But the common name is violet tooth polypore because if it were younger and nicer, you could see that the edge here is actually violet colored, and it can be quite bright when it's young. And it has teeth instead of pores or gills, so it has those like stalagmite looking things that we were talking about before. So this is older, but if it were younger, it'd be quite a pretty violet happening. Chnoderma.
Ishnad.
Resinosum, like resin, because they often get this like dark colored water on the top. It's just water basically, and it's just because mushrooms are made by, you know, pushing themselves via water, and they don't want to dry out because then they'll abort, so it just kind of keeps some water all over it.
The full
And
name
it's an
again?
identifying characteristic because it usually has that water there. So if you look down here, you'd probably find some little water droplets on it. It's called Ichnoderma resinosum or resinous polypore. And it's edible. And that's the bottom. And the bottom will kind of stain when you touch it too, so that's a notable characteristic.
Oh.
Yeah, and it feels pretty. Strains of mushrooms on, it would start growing a whole new fungus.
This
And
would.
you wouldn't have to get a spore. You could just get literally any bit of the inside, because the whole fungus, basically the mushroom is just made by the fungus turning itself into that shape. As compared to all of our different body parts, they all have different uses. It's like that, and you know, the kidney's only ever going to be your kidney, whereas that mushroom used to just be part of the mycelium, and you know, once it rots away, the energy will go back to just being more of the mycelium or whatever. So that is these little cups. Oh, there's some more down here actually. There's a clump of them down this way. Right here.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And they're called, I'm sorry.
Ascocorin. A-S-C-O-C-O-R-Y-N-E. Ascocorin.
You can see them there. There's more down that way. There's two there. You can see some here.
Yeah, I don't know what that is. No, that's not the same thing. The quick one is bottom one. That's you can look at the bottom. So you can see on this turkey tail that it is white, and if you look very closely, you will see little dots. They're hard to see, but if you look very closely with this guy, you can see that there's clearly dots on this. Kind of have to figure out how you want to use it. I usually go like that.
And the dots tell you what?
That there are pores, as compared to if there were not pores, it would be a different thing. There are a lot of fungi that don't produce mushrooms. No problem. There are a lot of fungi, for instance, that will just live inside of a tree, and its entire life cycle is just being that mycelium that we were talking about and living inside of a tree. And that's literally all that it does, and it will not produce a mushroom. But there are, you know, a lot of them that do produce mushrooms. Technically, just because of the diversity of fungi, most fungi don't produce mushrooms.
Is this a mushroom marshmallow
No, this is just a very young version of that thing that was over there. Okay. It's just when it's young and forming, but it looks like it probably aborted.
Mushrooms like live eternally?
As far as we know, they can. We don't have any reason to think that they can't. There are definitely fungus that are like thousands of years old. Well, there's a lot that we don't know about mushrooms. What I was saying is that we are not particularly sure why some of them glow in the dark, even though quite a few of them do bioluminesce. We're not really sure why some of them are psychedelic. That's a really weird mystery. We don't know why they would have created that. We don't know why some of them have amatoxins that take 6 days to kill people, because that's obviously not a very good strategy for keeping people from eating you if it takes that long. So basically, just because mushrooms are much more ephemeral than, like, for instance, plants or birds or something like that, we haven't done as much studying on them, and we just haven't spent the time to figure those things out, basically. And we need to study them more, which is why I'm here. I'm getting people into mushrooms.